Hello and welcome to Ahead of the Curve. I am Jonathan Gellner, and thank you so much for joining us today. Today we have on Kyle Wagner, who is an author, a teacher, and a coach. Kyle is a former standout high school baseball player who went on to play Division I baseball at Wake Forrest and a year professionally in the Angels organization. Kyle was also a part of the historic 2015 Redland Little League team that went on to win the United States Championship and compete in the Little League World Series. Kyle is the author of 2 books, Green Light Hitting and How the Rivercats Won, which details the Little League World Series run. But also, Kyle is one of my favorite Twitter follows because he always helps me to think deeper on different subjects like practice design and player development. We dig deep in this episode and you're going to love it. Here is Kyle Wagner. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I'm a big fan of the podcast, and I'm humbled that you invited me.
Definitely. I feel weird calling you Kyle. I may just call you Wags. Would that be better?
Whatever. There's plenty of us to go around. I respond to Wags just fine.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I know that. Well, I appreciate you saying that you listen to the show. I appreciate you saying that you like the show. That's always a humbling thing to hear. I know that there has been a couple of times that your book has been dropped as far as the resources go with Green Light Hitting and how the Rivercats won, which is really, really cool. But for our listeners who want to get to know you a little bit better about your baseball background and how you decided to get into coaching, do you mind going into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think in many respects it's a common story. I played baseball at Wake Forest, and I played 1 year professionally in the Angels organization. And I had a really candid conversation with Tom Kochman, who I have a ton of respect for. He was my manager at the time, and I know he's still prominent in baseball circles. And he basically said, "Hey, Wags, we're never going to cut you, but we don't think you're ever going to be a big leaguer. So if you want to ride buses for a while, that's certainly an option. But if you want to get on with your life, we wouldn't fault you for that." And I guess at that point, I decided that coaching was probably the avenue I wanted to pursue. I coached. I went back to Wake Forest. I coached Division III school in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. Those were great memories. But really, the staple of my coaching, the foundation, was at Redland High School in Pennsylvania. And then ultimately we started a training center, Go Wags. And that's where my brother and I spent eight great years, but 8 very challenging years too. I mean, a ton of success, but a ton of hard work to get that thing up and rolling. Yeah. And I don't know if you wanted me to elaborate on Brett. My brother, I mentioned Brett, and he we're identical twins. And he was definitely the better baseball player. He was a first round draft pick from the Cardinals. And, I had many people tell me growing up, "Hey, if you hit, you'll play in the big leagues." And Brett could hit. I mean, Brett was a left-handed pitcher, but he could swing it. He played for Team USA, and he had great success at Wake Forest as an offensive player. And I guess in many respects, that's probably where my drive was born, was that someone with my DNA could do something that I wanted to do. And the quest was on. How could I figure that out? How could I pass some of that insight on to the kids that I coach? So Brett and I have a special relationship, but very, very much of my coaching is rooted in the fact that I wish I could have been better. And every day, literally every day, I saw someone that looked like me that was better.
Oh, that's awesome. I love hearing that story. And so now let's flash forward a couple of years. You are a teacher. And so I know firsthand of how big of an influence teaching had on my coaching career, because to me, they're one and the same, right? And so can you dig into a little bit about how does being a teacher help you with, being a baseball coach or being an instructor or anything like that?
The biggest thing that I've been a teacher for 20 years. So in hindsight, the biggest thing that I have gained, the best perspective that I have gained is this phrase that I use: attendance doesn't imply consent. And what I mean by that is, so often as coaches, these kids that we get to work with, we just assume that they're there by choice, and all of our goals are the same, and we wear the same uniform, and how could they not be the same? Of course, winning. But as a teacher, many kids that you come into contact with on a daily basis do not share your same goals. They do not share your priorities. They do not share your dreams and aspirations in any way, and yet you're asked to influence them and educate them, and that's where the magic happens. That's really what can separate great teachers from average teachers, is how can I influence people that don't necessarily see my value yet, and aren't quite sure what I can give them. So that's probably one of the biggest insights I've gained as a teacher.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. So I was a I was a social studies teacher for a long time, and my first intro to I needed to get better at that exact aspect of what you're talking about of making sure that attendance doesn't imply consent was teaching government to ninth graders, and they can't vote yet. They have no interest in politics, and so trying to make it interesting while getting them to show up every single day, and just truly trying to get them to love the class first, and just love being there, and enjoying it. And then I think that we can go from there, which I'm sure we'll get into some of that stuff later. But that was really my first like aha moment of, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be the subject. It can be the environment that we're putting them in that can help with the subject knowledge. And that was really one of my biggest keys early on. But let's talk about you talk a lot about just how to help players take ownership. I know you posted a video last week that talked about 3 keys to drive. And so let's dig into that a little bit about just individualized player development plans. And I know that you're huge on this. So kind of if you have some listeners that are wanting to take the first step towards that, how do we help our players to take ownership of their careers?
Well, for one, I think we as coaches, we need to do a better job of recognizing our audience. So many times, I watch videos online, or I see clinics or something along those lines, and I'm like, I love the message, but the audience, you might not be hitting your target. And at Go Wags, one of the first things we did to create this ownership, to create buy-in, to create this purpose, so to speak, was to recognize that you've got what we labeled sampling, specialized, and invested athletes. And your sampling athletes is exactly as it sounds. They're sampling the sport. They haven't committed anything other than small amounts of time to practice that sport. And then the specialized group was those kids that were on the cusp of making it their life's journey and their passion. And then the invested kids, those were the kids that, they get at the big league level, they get at the college level. The invested kid is the kid that has in fact chosen the sport and made it his life's journey. So whenever I start talking about Daniel Pink's research from Drive and Mastery, Purpose, and Autonomy, you first have to say, well, who exactly is chasing it? Is it a young person? Are they just sampling the sport, or are they close to making a commitment, or have they made a commitment? And then once you determine that, then you can start to go down that road of, what is mastery, what is purpose, and what is autonomy. So, and I can keep going, but when you're a sampling kid, when you're really young, your purpose is often wrapped up in your team. That's how you find your purpose, is who are the kids around me on every day, and that's why parents are desperate to try to find good teams for their sons, because they know that that's where their purpose lives. It's showing up on weekends and playing with good players and winning tournaments, and that becomes their purpose. And then when you move into that specialized area and that invested area, you start to get some subtle cues from your parents, from coaches. Hey, you're really good, and you could be really good, and maybe you ought to consider maybe a new travel team, one that can develop your skills a little bit better. And all of a sudden purpose takes a little twist where now it becomes more individualized. And now it's important to showcase our skills because we start to think about college down the road and potentially even the Major League Baseball draft. And one of the things that I tried to do at Go Wags is we had young kids all the way up to older kids, and you really have to take stock into how that purpose changes for athletes as they grow, because that really can define team culture if you're not aware of how someone's purpose is evolving as they grow. And I know that's deep, but I thought about it a lot. And to make to 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 make a bunch of really good baseball players, not just 12 on your team or not just the one in your home. You really have to be locked in on how many different goals and aspirations they have, and what in fact is their purpose. So I hope I addressed that as well as you wanted.
Sure. No, I love that. And so let's dig into the practical piece. So let's say that I'm an athletic director and I hired you to be our high school baseball coach, to teach and coach. Where would you start with regards to that? We want to start there, but how do we?
So culture is so big, and what you're getting at is how can we create a team that certainly one will be proud of and one will be successful on the field. And you've got to, you follow me and you know that one of my favorite phrases is intent precedes content, which means kids want to show up and they want to play. And there are a lot of really good coaches that have a great message, but in order to get in order to create excitement for a high school program, especially in today's specialized world where your best basketball players might be just basketball players and your best football players might just be football players, you have to create an excitement to want to come out. And without wins and losses, if you just hired me without wins and losses as my resume, I've got to convince every athlete that I recognize their individual purpose, their individual goals, and I'll create an environment that I guarantee that they can grow in, and I'll also guarantee that we're going to have a blast doing it. I think so often we get wrapped up in this growth mindset where every day has to be about gaining ground on the goal, and we lose sight that a lot of culture is driven by an energy and enthusiasm of wanting to be there. And again, I mentioned that attendance doesn't imply consent. First and foremost, if I'm your high school coach, my priority is making the baseball program something people want to be a part of, and that absolutely has to precede the content.
No, that's a great point. And again, I think that your ideas are absolutely cutting edge and perfect. Maybe not necessarily cutting edge, but it's more of okay. Let's cut through all of the stuff that we deem maybe not as important, and then let's start there. And that's one of the things that I really respect about you is you really you mentioned it earlier. We're digging deep, but you dig deep to get to the core of what's actually important, and then once you get there, I think you're able to figure out, and you see these different trends, whether it be on social media or what other programs are doing, and you're going, you know what, I respect that, but that wouldn't work for us because X, Y, and Z. And just if I know that the coaches are going to ask, but what are some different practical things that we can do as coaches to make sure that the players are enjoying showing up on a daily basis?
Well, I get a question quite a bit, like what is the one practical skill that a coach needs to create this intent? And I always say it's a beginner's mindset. It is 100% a beginner's mindset. And the more you learn in this game, learning is fun, it's addictive, but the more you learn, the more you want to implement what you've learned. And the trade-off to implementing what it is you've learned sometimes falls at the expense of your kids just enjoying the game. I mean, when you the people that decide to play the game of baseball, they decided to play the game for various reasons, but invariably there probably was someone that they saw that they really wanted to emulate and be like, Mike Trout or Aaron Judge or someone in the Little League World Series, and that's what they want to do. They want to play a child's game, and they want to play it as long as possible, and they want to be really, really good at it. And of course, the game gets hard at the end, and of course, there are 1,000 different skills that they need to make it at the end. But when I talk about that beginner's mindset, you have to understand that making it at the end is a long way away, and many of these kids, they want to enjoy the game today. And then if here's the magic: if they enjoy the game today, and if they have a blast playing the game, they will show up. It's as if their skills compound because they're so excited to show up that they're thinking about it even when they're not practicing. And that to me is the one thing, this beginner's mindset, this constantly keep reinvesting in. How do the kids see it? What do they want out of practice today? And again, sampling, specialized, invested. The invested kids, they embrace boring more than the specialized and the sampling kids. So there's a lot of invested kids, college age kids, professional guys that love boring. They eat it up. All right, so that to them is fun. You have to. When I say fun, I'm not talking about water balloons and dodgeball. I'm talking about really good stuff that they know can help them grow. But it has to have an element of emotion in it. It's got to attach to them so they can carry it with them.
Definitely. And, I have a friend of mine that I've been really, going back and forth with on some different ideas on how we can do that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. And, we talk about individualized player plans a lot. And to me, that just sounds completely daunting. And after having these conversations, I don't think it necessarily is. I think it's a two-way street, obviously, or maybe not obviously for some. But I think it truly all starts with clarity and understanding about what the player needs, like what the player actually needs to do to get better, the how, what, when, how, and why. And you talk about teaching the game, and I think that the more clear and the more understanding a person has of what is going on in a game, it's like chess. The more you understand, I don't know chess. I've never played chess. I think it may be interesting for me if I learned it, but people just, the more that they learn about chess, the more that they really enjoy it. And I think that baseball can be the same way. It's we have to take a step back and go, okay, we're probably going to have to teach the game, and we're going to have to collaborate with these players and to, the what, when, how, and why of how we can get them better. And I think if we take care of those two steps, I think on your, beginner's mind and learning journey, I think that will help in those aspects. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I'll tell you, I think one of the things that I tell folks at the younger ages is, and I say this in my book, you got to throw the kitchen sink at them. We coaches, we must stop sorting the material. In other words, we chunk it and we give it to them in ways that we think they can interpret it. But when you give them everything, when you don't assume that it's over their head, and I coached a lot of very successful young travel ball teams, and the last thing I wanted to be was the gatekeeper to their knowledge. Like I knew what I wanted them to know, and there were super intelligent baseball players, and I would say something and I would think, wow, that was a lot. And then before you know it, they're executing it on Saturday afternoon, and I'm just floored. And you would pose the question, where did you get that? Well, you talked about it that one day. Yeah, okay. So one day I talked about it, and you went out and implemented that. And that's what I mean. I think we just throw the kitchen sink at them. We just give them everything we've got, and we let them sort it out. I think probably if some of the parents to my teams were here, they probably would say, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they probably would say the biggest differentiating aspect was our practices, is that we gave them so much, and we trusted their imagination, and we trusted their willingness to learn, and they grew because of it. So when you talk about developing skills in a personalized individual plan, a lot of that personalization, it forms on its own when you just give them everything, right? Don't sort it. Don't say, well, he's only 7 and he's a shortstop and he's 10 and he's an outfielder. Like you teach to the whole, and then you let them interpret things as they see fit, and they will surprise you. They will start to grow in some crazy ways. I'm just afraid when I hear personalized plan, sometimes I'm always wondering, who crafts that plan, and are they narrowing it more than they should? That's where I'll leave that.
That's a great plan, or that's a great idea and a great point. And like we were talking about off the mic earlier, we are no longer the sole proprietor of knowledge because, we have the history of the world in our pockets, right? And so I think that that's also interesting. And it's something that it's great for us because we have more access to information, but it's also, we need to realize we're not the only ones who have it anymore. And so I really like that. But you hit on practice design a little bit. Can you go into more detail about how you would, again, I hired you as the athletic director, so I want to hear what your practice plans would look like. So if you don't mind, go into it a little bit.
So, baseball is a great sport because it's an individual sport that masquerades as a team sport. Only one guy fields a ground ball, only one guy hits, only one guy on the mound. So, your mistakes are amplified in many different ways. So there's this urge to develop all of these individual skills, and it's critical. And lots of people are making lots of money nationwide on that exact thing, teaching people how to throw harder and hit better and defend. But the game of baseball at its core is a team game, and it is a social experience. And I believe that a team practice consisting of an hour and a half or 2 hours has to embrace that social experience. I don't believe that when you get boys or men together in a team environment, that the idea of individual training should exist. I believe that's for early work at the big league level. I believe that's for cage work and what I would call master coaches at the younger level. But I believe wholeheartedly, and I put some stuff out there, that hour and a half or that 2 hour time that you have is a social experience. And because it's a social experience, that's where the coach really has to have an idea of how he wants to communicate his information. I put that video out there, and I put a lot of information in that video. But I'll just say this: I'll say that one of my beliefs is that planning is more important than the plan. So if I were talking to the athletic director, I would say I don't believe, as a baseball coach, that I'm not talking about a football coach, but as a baseball coach, I believe that I go down with a scripted beginning and probably a scripted second piece, but then after that, I'm going to leave it open to where the flow of the practice dictates. I don't want to script what it is we're doing, because if I script it, then I don't allow for that great question. I don't allow for that why from the kids. And being very specific, let's say I'm running a coach pitch scrimmage, and in the middle of the coach pitch scrimmage, our base running reads at second base are just terrible, or we're not getting back and tagging efficiently at third base, or our double play, we're rushing the double play. We're not, I like to say 1 before 2. Whatever it is in that situational scrimmage, immediately I can switch tracks and I can do what I call a micro teach. And then we spend time on that micro teach. And then we finish up with hitting at the end. I want them excited about practice, and assuming you're not in a cold weather climate where it's like 35 degrees. You try to save hitting for the end. So, they have a great feel and a fun memory to come back to. But that's how I would run my practices. Is I would script the first two pieces. I would allow for some flexibility at the end, trying to take advantage of the emotion of the players.
Really cool. Sounds like a lesson plan from probably from one of your classes, which I can dig. So let's dig into, okay, Kyle, I really like this and this is great, but how do I balance the player development that you're talking about and winning?
Uh, well, winning is so important, and that might sound contradictory, but our young people need to win. They need to know what it feels like. They need to know how to approach it. They need coaches that value winning. And I think sometimes the youth coaches, the message is you have to develop, and then they feel almost some sort of guilt or shame if they value winning. But young people need to learn how to win too. And I tell people it's an and both model. If you win and you teach people how to win, you grow the competitor. And it's so difficult to grow the competitor in a cage environment. You can work on skills and you can work on the swing and you can throw harder, but there's only one way to become a better pitcher. It's, can I throw the 2-0 changeup? Can I overcome the shortstop's error? Can I come in and throw three before four with a crowd chanting? And like, competitors need to be grown as well as skills. And the only way that you can grow competitors is if you value winning. You can't dismiss the act of winning and still say, yeah, we're growing competitors. Well, no, you're not, because you're okay with a secondary result. So those two things, it's an and both model. They have to coexist. So we would constantly talk about expected behavior, and this is what's required. And when we play games, when they put a scoreboard up, or when we go on a weekend. But ultimately, when I talk about the short game and the long game, the short game is driven by winning, which is ultra important. But the long game is driven by development, right? I mean, you're not. My son is a freshman at Georgia, and quite frankly, the coaches at Georgia don't really care how many games he won prior to showing up on campus. What they care about is how he can help them win now that he's on campus, right? So, but what they won't know, but I'm sure what they'll appreciate, is the fact that he won and he developed some competitive skills that will help him win along the way. And I just don't know how you develop those without playing to win at the youth level. But now, having said that, I don't think that that's something that needs taught. I think most people play to win. I think what they need reminded of is, we play to win, but we do it the right way. And if you've got 12 guys on your roster, then all 12 guys need to be accounted for and they need to be appreciated. Because I think when people hear, yeah, we play to win, they think in terms of winning like a big league team wins, where you've got starters and you've got bench guys. No, that's not when you're developing sampling and specialized players. If you can't win with your whole roster, then you don't deserve to win. And I think that was really a critical piece to the Go Wags model. Was not only did we train them, did we grow them, did we practice them the right way, but we're on weekends. I didn't really want to drive home feeling that player 12 didn't contribute to the trophy. So that's another point I'll add there.
No, that's great. And so for our listeners too, I know that you're a teacher, you are an author, and you're a coach, but you've also had some decent experiences in, let's say, the Little League World Series, right? And you guys did decent at that. So I would love to hear a little bit about how that all came together And truly, like if you could dissect that season and you could go back in and say, guys, this is what we did and this is why it worked. It was a lot of different things that just came together perfectly with a lot of great kids. But here are the things that I would truly, truly take away from that.
That was a magical season, and I love talking about it, so I appreciate the question. My brother was the coach of that team. He was an assistant coach. Tom Pfeiffer, a childhood friend, was the head coach, and they 100% embraced green light hitting. And in some respects, Nomar Garcia Parra, he sort of commented on it, and it was. I mean, what our boys did was sort of extreme with how they went about their approach in the batter's box, but the greatest thing that model gave our boys was a fearless approach between the lines. Is they were trained, and many of their friends were trained that came before them. That when you get in the batter's box, it's supposed to be a fun experience, and so often I think when we overcoach kids, when we get wrapped up in results too early, we create a fearful mindset where they don't want to disappoint dad, or they're careful and they're cautious, and we just that green light hitting was just the antithesis of that. It was turn and burn, it was let it rip, and we've since moved away from some of those ideas as the boys have become more invested. But in that particular group, a ton of credit goes to those coaches that really realized that Little League baseball, as much as I love it, as much as I enjoyed every single aspect of it, it's not baseball. I mean, you can't lead, and the distances are so small, and so we called it, it's arena ball, and our coaches trained them for arena ball. If you would go to a practice, what you would see adult coaches, either myself or my brother or Aaron Walter, who was another good friend, and they would calibrate the radar at 70, 71, 72 miles an hour, and they would hone in their velocity, and the rest of the time they would just hit from distance off of 70, 71, 72. And we would often laugh because some parents would say, "Are you guys ever going to take ground balls?" We're like, "No, it's arena ball. If we hit, we'll win. If we pitch, we'll win." And they did. They bludgeoned people, and they were a fun team to watch. It didn't hurt that Cole matured very quickly. Cole, my nephew, was just lights out, and the whole team was. They just a pleasure to watch. And they lost to Japan in the World Championship, but what a year 2015 was. Thank you for that question.
Of course. No, I have, I don't know if I followed you then, but it is really neat because I don't watch a lot of the Little League World Series now, but I remember watching that group and I just remember them just taking daddy hacks. And I was going, okay, maybe, the put it in play model is probably something that we could potentially get away from. And, that was during my process of trying to decide who I wanted to be as a coach and how I wanted to teach hitting and to gain more understanding about it. And so that was neat in my life too. It's crazy that was 5 years ago. But let's let's go ahead and dig into your book, How the Rivercats Won. And it is on Kindle Unlimited right now, which is pretty cool. It's on Amazon, and I'll make sure and link that in the show notes. But you talked about how to authentically build relationships, and I think that it's set. I know you are like this too. Everything is always somewhere in the middle between usually what people say and then the other side says, and it's always somewhere in the middle. And people say they don't know how much you know until they know how much you care, which I think for the most part still rings true. You have to have some sort of a relationship with a player and them being able to see that you care for them and that you have some subject knowledge that you're trying to help them get better. But tell us a little bit about how to authentically build relationships. And then I would love for you to dig into the competition aspect of that at that as well.
All right, I'm making a note there just so I don't forget. So I believe that there's two kinds of relationships. One is transactional and one is transformational. And unfortunately, the transactional relationship is that relationship that says, "Hey, you owe me something," right? And I'm your boss, and you have to perform a certain task for me. And if you do what I'm asking you to do, then life is good. And you've touched on it here about the old model, the hierarchy of sorts was a transactional relationship. I'm the coach, you're the player, you give me what I want, and we move on. And I think the world, because it's just opened up and the information is out there. I think the successful relationships, the successful coaches, the successful cultures, and the teams are driven by this transformational relationship, which is no one owes anyone anything other than their best effort. And as long as both parties reciprocate, as long as my player works hard for me and I work hard for my player, we build a ton of trust. And you're going to fail, and I'm going to fail, and that's okay because we're gonna get up and we're going to do it all over again. And I think that is the critical component to authentic relationships. It is a relationship that doesn't have expectations. It is a relationship that says, I am just giving you my best. And yeah, we need results, and yeah, we need outcomes. If we don't have that, then I might lose my job, and you might be cut from my team. But we have to work under the idea that it's going to be okay. And if we function like this, things will take care of themselves. And um, I just think it's that reciprocity of that relationship, that transactional relationship. It's what drives culture. And the reason why it's so difficult in a competitive venue is because we need wins. We need wins, and we need hits to get wins, and we need strikes instead of balls to take the mound. And it takes a very broad perspective coach to realize that those things do in fact come when you focus on the process and you focus on a transformational relationship. My brother loves truth and paradox, and that's really what it comes down to. The truth and the paradox is, if you want the outcomes, if you want the results, you can't focus on the outcomes and the results. And that's a belief that I had. And I think a lot of respect for Butch Chaffin. I know he's been on your show, and he put out a sarcastic tweet about a travel coach reaching out to a high school coach, and I was just floored. I was like, "Holy smokes, that's amazing!" And he said, "Nah, that never happens." And it's a shame that it doesn't happen, because like that is the transformational relationships we need. We need relationships uh, that are driven with this giving, this idea of, I'll do my best, I'll give you what I've got, the best that I've got, with no expectations in return. And competition creates this focus on the W mindset, and then this result oriented approach sort of sabotages those transformational relationships.
No, that's really, really good. So I want to rewind just a little bit. By the way, love Butch. He's awesome. I did not know that that was sarcastic, because I was really excited to see that for him. I
I
thought,
didn't know either. And he said, "No, it was sarcastic." And I was like, "No,
wow.
no."
I know. I hope that we see that trend be more move to the forefront, because I've had this conversation with, whenever I was a coach, and then I've been helping, or I've been hanging out with some people who are just instructors over this quarantine time, and having some conversations with them, and they asked, what do we have to do to improve that relationship, and I said, just reach out. I mean, it's both ways. It absolutely is. But at the end of the day, we're looking at the player who wants to get better, who's going to an instructor for a reason, and who is wanting to win games with his high school coach and build great relationships. And so, in the end, the player benefits. But I want to rewind a little bit, and you talked about to get, and I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit, because I'm trying to remember exactly what you said. You said, to get the results we want, we can't focus on the results that we get. Is that something similar? You said that your brother said it, and it was just, it blew me away. But then I've since had 17 thoughts. But can you dig into that a little bit about what you mean, because I love that.
Yeah. So in the book, I talk about the inside view and the outside view, and I think it really defines how we see things. And coaches take an inside view of things. Like they know that you can't focus on winning. You have to focus on all the things that lead to the winning. But on the outside view, like think of it from a fan's perspective. If the fans don't care how you get it done, they just want that you get it done. So they don't care if you win 7-1 or 7-6. As long as you get the W, we're walking away and things are fine and happy, and the fan base is content, and the coach probably gets to keep his job. But what I'm talking about is that it's that understanding that if we focus on the little things, and the classic example I always use is when a kid swings and misses, and the natural instinct for the coach is to yell something like, keep your eye on the ball. All right, so what you just did is you just bought into a result. You just recognized that he swung and missed, and now you're going to coach the result. Whereas the swing itself might have been fine, but the pitch might have been a little bit out of the zone, or the pitch may have had some sink to it that you can't see, but it was a great swing, and you made a great move on that ball, and I'd want you to do it again if the situation dictated. So where some people would say keep your eye on the ball and dive into a result oriented nature, I'm going to clap and applaud and dive into a process oriented nature. And if I do that enough, if I tie into the process, my results will be better than your results, because what a result oriented coach does is it creates caution, and it places conditions on the relationship. It's and that's what, when I said that truth and paradox, if you want the results, you can't focus on the results. That's sort of what I meant by that. And all great coaches know it. All great coaches, whether they might not be able to say it, but they know it. They know that if another one of my favorites is a result oriented approach. So if you throw a 2-0 changeup to the 3-hitter, and that's your third best pitch, and he hits it out of the yard, and you come off the field, many coaches will say, hey, you can't get beat with your third best pitch there. You can't do that. All right. And then the next inning, he throws a 2-0 changeup and he gets a swing and a miss. And then they'll say, hey, way to trust that changeup. And I'm like, wait a second now. He threw a 2-0 changeup, the one you said yes, the one you said no. You're literally just being a result-oriented coach. And players don't grow that way. They do not grow that way when coaches are result-oriented. And the great coaches are process-oriented. They recognize it. They recognize what they want from their athlete, and they're a little bit more lenient with the outcome, because they know it's a challenging game.
No, that's so good, and I'm shaking my head thinking about instances that I've done that same thing, and it's man, yeah.
Right, and this summer I was watching it over and over again. It's a batter took ball. Well, the count was 3-1, and he took what he thought was ball 4, and he flipped his bat to run to first base, and the umpire called strike 2. The coach lit into him. Let the umpire call it. And I'm sitting over there thinking, like, okay, yeah, that's sound. I mean, I get it. I know what you're telling. Don't show the umpire up. Well, the very next batter, same exact thing. The umpire called a ball 4, and he went to first base, but nothing was said. Nothing was said. And that's a result oriented. I mean, and it takes incredible insight, and you have to lock into exactly what you want to teach. But the low hanging fruit is always the results, and it takes a much broader perspective to coach on process.
How much does fear? How much does fear? If we could take that out from players, how much would that benefit them?
And that's the thing, right? I mean, every player knows that he needs to produce to get between the lines. I mean, that's playing time isn't charity. It's not like coaches are just handing it out. Like, you've got to earn it. So the obvious thing is results matter. It's the obvious thing, but the not so obvious thing is, how do you get the results? And how you get the results is this play with your hair on fire. And it's funny, one of my daughter's uh, friends said her quote in her yearbook is going to be one of my quotes. And I said, which one's that? And she said, make bold decisions at full speed. And I said, okay, there you go. Make bold decisions at full speed. And that's, again, that's a process driven idea, is that, look, the results are going to happen, and it is a game of failure, but you have to make bold decisions, and you have to do them at full speed. And the minute that we create an ounce of doubt, all of a sudden our speed slows, and a little bit of apprehension, and then the results really do suffer. So, this coaching game, it's one of the hardest things that we're tasked to do. And um, I do talk about that. I forget what inning I talk about that in my book, but the inside view and the outside view. And when you start to see things in that way, you go, oh, okay, so this is a really big deal for you because you have an inside view. And for me, I don't. It's not that big a deal. I just care that we get there on time. So so
That's really good.
yeah, things start to make sense that way.
Definitely. And, rewinding a little bit, whenever I talked about clarity too, we can be clear with our words, but if if our actions don't align with those, what we're asking them to do, like the example that you just said, if we say, hey, we want to be really good at dirt ball reads, and then the first one that gets thrown out on a dirt ball read, that catcher makes a great pick and a great throw and a great tag, and you're out, and then we get all over them, then that breeds more confusion than clarity, and then so kids are going to be like, okay, now what? Right. And it's going to breed that confusion that you just mentioned. But I did want to hit on the competition aspect. I know that just athletes in general love to compete. And I think that you get into athletics because that's a part of who you are, is you like to just compete and see where you measure up and how we can get better. But that's also part of the title of the Rivercats book. You talked about the different competition aspects of it. So can you give us some different ways to do that, and then maybe some practical drills or examples that we could steal from you?
With competition,
Absolutely.
so one of the things I've started doing, and someone reached out to me on Twitter about this. Uh, competition competition sometimes makes the act of playing baseball difficult, because the pulse starts to accelerate, and then your heart rate, and then your palms get sweaty, and you get some nervous anxiety. And one of the ways that this manifests is through anticipation. And like I was thinking about, as a hitter, if I knew, if I was fifth up in the inning, I could start to see this inning play out, and I could start to run scenarios, and guys got on base. And then you start to go, okay, so I'm going to come up with runners on first and second, or maybe even bases loaded. And then all of a sudden, you're adding context to that at bat. So one of the things that I've started to do working with hitters is do that exact thing, where you take a group of 6 or 8 and you say, hey, we're down 3 and we've got 6 outs to go. And what's awesome about it is they so don't want to disappoint their buddies. They don't want to be the one that makes the third out with runners at second and third and 2 outs. So what you do is create this little competition. But in the past, I would always see competition in terms of one team against another team in practice. And that's true, and that's great. But lately here, I've been creating competition with one team against the standard. And then I let their imagination drive sort of the energy, and drive the competition aspect of it. And it's been so good. And the results and the authentic displays of emotion. Like, we did one this summer where it just happened to be my nephew Cole hit he hit a home run, but it, he did it with, like, they were tie game, runner on, or they were down 1 with a runner on third, and Cole homered in this this small little competitive environment, and they went nuts. They were jumping all around, and I was like, yep, that's what I'm after. That's what I'm interested in. Some other things that I'll do is speaking to the competitive nature. I believe the most accurate throwing team is the best defensive team. So what we'll do is we'll often do throwing accuracy drills on the clock. At the young levels, the drill is just a matter of completing something, but at the higher levels, we'll put them on a clock and maybe we'll go. So if you've got all infield positions and I'm standing in the middle of the diamond, maybe I'll say, hey, all double plays. And then I'll just start firing the ball at certain positions. So I'll fire it at the second baseman and maybe they're in double play depth. So it's a 4-6-3 and we'll put them on the clock and see how fast they got that one. Or maybe they're infield in and it's 4-2-3 and we'll put them on the clock and they just have they have a ton of fun trying to beat the standard. So I guess that's probably where my shift has occurred in practice settings. It's that players on a team like to compete against the standard as part of a team, maybe even more so than splitting the team up and competing against themselves. So that's something I've done. I just gave you 2 examples there of what I've done recently.
No, I really like that, and I think that those are all great things to do. Really, really cool. You mentioned earlier about how important authentic relationships are, and I think that we as coaches, if you've coached long enough, you've at least had this player one time, maybe every year, but the player that you can't get through to them. Like it's you've tried everything, and maybe your assistants have tried everything, or your head coach has tried, and it just they seem to be uncoachable. What do we do with that player?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was on a call with Coach Rob Cooper, and he asked me. He said, "What's the biggest myth in coaching?" And I said the idea that players are uncoachable. And he said, "Well, we obviously elaborated." And I said, "Look, I'm just of the mindset where if I'm looking in the mirror first, if someone is uncoachable, I want to know what it is that I'm doing that I can't get him to execute to be the best player that he can be. But we know for sure, and this has proven countless of times over history, is that uncoachable players get a new environment and then all of a sudden they become coachable. And I think you have to at least look at yourself and say, hey, look, if I'm in it for player development, I have to be honest with myself. There are times when the environment that I have created is not conducive to this particular player. And if that situation pops up, I think an honest conversation takes place. And no one has to be blamed. It's not like you're the reason why this isn't working or I'm the reason why. But regardless, it's not working. And if it doesn't change, we probably do need a new place to exist, new scenery, and that's happened. That happens for every coach. I mean, it's why transfers exist for the health of the player, and so as long as player and coach look in the mirror and say, "Am I doing everything in my power to make this experience productive?" Again, coaches can't just place the blame on the player, and the player can't place the blame on the coach. And if they sit down and if they think they are in fact doing everything possible, well, then yeah, we might need a change of scenery.
Great answer for a really, really tough question. So you nailed that one. And I want to end with a couple of quick hitters. And again, they don't have to be. I think Kevin Wilson set the all-time record with like a 6-word answer, which was really, really good. But that it doesn't have to be lightning style. Just some quick hitters. But you mentioned earlier you're the dad of a baseball player. I mean, obviously, I would love if my son played baseball. I just want him to be passionate about something someday. But what is your best advice for those listening who are dads of maybe youth level high school baseball players?
The dad hat will almost always trump the coach hat. As many self talks as you give yourself, you will always be a dad first and foremost, which means you have to decide how it is you want to coach your son, and then you have to be consistent across the board. If you're a pat on the back guy to your son, and that's just how you believe he should be raised, then you have to be that way with his teammates. And if you're hard on your son and you drive him, and that's what you believe, then that's how you have to treat his teammates. So that would be my advice to all those dad coaches: is as much as you want, that dad hat is going to rear its head. And when it does, and I talk about this in the book. I would always play a game when I would go to fields. Can you find his son? And I would try to see which son belongs to which coach just by the way they interacted. And I always made it a priority to try not to be that guy, but it's hard. It's hard.
Definitely. What is a disheartening trend that you see in baseball today that you'd like to see changed?
High school coaches are losing respect, and it's not the fault of the travel coach. The travel coaches are great. I was one. Travel coaches are knowledgeable. They often have professional experience. They often see these kids in the summer. But the high school coach sees these kids compete in their community many times with more at stake, state championships and division championships, and people grow up knowing each other. So rivalries run deep in communities, and the high school coach has got to be given opportunities to comment on a player and his capabilities in the environment that he sees. I think far too often they get labeled as something under a travel coach, and I think that's disheartening.
I love that answer. We're going to end with this one because I think that this is one that you sent over, which I really like, that I may steal from you for the rest of these episodes. But what's the greatest opportunity for athletic development today?
Well, there's no doubt that the data that we're presented with affords these athletes a chance to get better faster than at any time in our existence. But it is a double-edged sword. I believe that data and imagination are opposite sides of the same coin. I think we need to be really careful when data trumps imagination. So the greatest opportunity we have for development, from a technological standpoint, from working with coaches, are these instruments of data. But from a emotional and heck, almost even spiritual standpoint, is this imagination that I talk about. And we got to be careful, because when players tie into numbers, they often lose some of their imagination. So it's a great time. Data is a wonderful thing to drive learning and to accelerate learning. But if you lose your imagination, I'm not sure it wasn't for the worse.
Interesting. I like that. So what we do at the end of the show is I'm just going to basically mute myself. I will ask, or I will link your Twitter page on the show notes down below. Is there another contact that you would like to have, or if any of the listeners want to get in contact with you, is that the best way?
Yeah, that's the best way. Yeah, that's
okay, perfect. Well, I'm just going to open up the mic for you and just give you free reign, to end our show today. Again, thank you so much for coming on, Kyle. I really do appreciate the content that you put out consistently. And I know that at the intro of the show, I put that you're one of my favorite Twitter followers because you do make me think differently about things. And I'm going to let you end it. So if you don't mind, I'm going to mute myself. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners before you go?
Being a coach and being a part of a team is so addictive. I mean, winning and planning, it's fun. I mean, it's what I miss so much about coaching. But I would just say that we owe it to our athletes to be an ambassador to the game. And one of the best ways that you can be an ambassador to the game is by complimenting players on the other team. I mean, I can't even think what would be more rewarding for an athlete to be approached by someone on the other team in a position of authority, and that guy say, "Hey, you were great today. You were great. the way you swung the bat, the way you defended, the way you hustled on and off the field, because I think that goes so far. And your own coach could say the same thing 15 times, but when the opposing coach says it one time, sometimes it'll last a lifetime. So that's what I would like to leave. Just be an ambassador to the sport, and look out for people beyond your team to help grow this game.
Thank you for listening to Ahead of the Curve. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, which could include Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, or YouTube. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it on social media to help get the word out. Once again, thank you for joining us.